Okay, hello and welcome to the last week of the term, and we're taking a second look at canals today. So I've been looking over people who have sent their work in. I've been looking over their work, and a sort of common thing that's kind of running through is the kind of approach with trees. So with this demonstration, I'm just really going to sort of concentrate on how to kind of approach trees, more specifically. So I've chosen this image from the ones that I've sent you, and I've chosen this one really because it just there's lots of green trees in here, and it's a question of how do we deal with so much green. So I've got the image here in colour, but I've also printed it out in black and white because I just wanted to really briefly talk about the tonal quality within the trees. So the way that I look at the trees is it just simply as blocks of shapes. So for example, I've got this kind of dark block here. Above that I've got a slightly kind of lighter block, and then I've got this darker block here at the back. On this side, I've got this sort of dark block of trees, and then I've got the kind of lighter trees here, and then I've got even lighter here at the back. So in terms of colours, in terms of tone, I'm just looking at blocks and shapes. And I think that's the main thing that I can kind of get across to you in terms of doing trees. The main thing is not to look at individual small detail, but just to look at the bigger, broader shapes that you can see. And really the best way to sort of demonstrate this is by painting. So that's what I'm going to do. So with that in mind, so big, broad shapes. Okay, so let's get started with the painting. So in terms of colours, I'm going to use the kind of the primary colours. So Windsor yellow, French ultramarine, alizarin, and I'm also going to bring in cobalt blue in that blue range, and I'm going to bring a little bit of burnt sienna in as well. So really in terms of colours, I'm thinking of balance. So green, maybe balance with its complementary, which is red. So I'm going to sort of bring some kind of redder kind of tones in order to balance that painting. And I've chosen two blues because I prefer a cobalt blue sky rather than a French ultramarine. And also I've got the French ultramarine there because I know I've got darker areas to deal with, and that will help. Okay, so let's start painting. So I'm going to start with my cobalt blue. Just kind of very kind of loosely, put the sky in. Okay, so once that's down, I'm going to start by putting in a very sort of yellowy blue down. So leaning more towards the yellow more than anything. Okay, so really that's that first layer of colour that's down, and what that kind of helps me to do is then kind of isolate the areas, and just kind of gives me something to then kind of build up on, and I can already see a lovely sort of balance of colours. So I've got my blue in almost kind of like three areas. I've got my lovely sort of strip of complementary red, which has now sort of beautifully run into the background and underneath here. and then I've got my patches of very yellow green here, you know, and that kind of helps me to then kind of build up the image that we have here. Okay, so it's a great kind of start for me. So once again, I'm going to let that dry completely naturally. I'm going to just leave it alone for about sort of half an hour or so, and then come back to it and have a look at it. Okay, so that's now nice and dry, and you can see it's kind of, you know, the colours have been allowed to kind of flow into one another. You know, I've got this lovely sort of flourish of green onto the bridge. You know, I've got this lovely sort of yellow and sort of orange colours that have come into the bridge, and that's sort of kind of been allowed to happen quite naturally. Okay, so the next thing to do is to then really start looking at the blocks of shapes that we need to kind of now bring into this. So remember, we're doing this in three, or trying to do this in 3 layers. So this layer is obviously the first layer. We're now going into our second layer. So now we can really start bringing in our kind of technique in terms of building those trees. So the ones that are here in the distance, you know, I don't really need to do too much to those because I want them to feel like they're in the distance. So really, I'm going to kind of start with that kind of foreground and then kind of move backwards. So I'll probably start on this side and kind of then work my way across. So one of the things that I want you to kind of really look at is how you can bring some of that teaching in. So for example, the negative painting. Perhaps what I could do is kind of work my way around these trees so that some of these kind of tree trunks are painted negatively. So I'm leaving the colour that's already there and I'm painting everything around those, especially in this kind of part here. I don't know whether you can see that. And then some of these other ones, perhaps I can, you know, paint those in later on. So, you know, I'm going to really kind of see how this works out and how it pans out. But that's what I'm thinking at the moment. And I'm really thinking of blocks of colour rather than kind of individual leaves, etc. So I'm going to start off again by mixing my my French ultramarine and my Windsor yellow to make a lovely sort of green colour. So because this is my kind of you know, second layer, perhaps, you know, I can kind of allow myself one more layer of colour perhaps. So, you know, I don't have to go completely dark. So the first thing I'm going to do is see if I can maybe just bring some of those kind of in perhaps some of that negative painting that I was talking about. So working very much kind of wet into wet and using kind of drop-ins really. So again, so when I'm doing the trees, all I'm doing is dab, 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 leaving gaps. Perhaps there's another one there. There's a tree roughly about there, and then it goes into sort of background and so can you see how I'm sort of creating interesting kind of patterns and things just by using a little bit of that kind of negative painting. And I keep kind of varying my mixes. I keep kind of thinking, right, okay, I'm going to add a little bit more of the green, a little bit more of the blue, just keep kind of changing it up. Perhaps here I'll just add a little bit more water so that this bit is a little less kind of definite. Dab, dab, dab is what I'm doing. And I keep changing the colour. Every now and then I'll keep going back and I'll keep changing that colour up. Okay, here again. So what I'm sort of trying to sort of do is create random marks. And perhaps the trees in the distance kind of really sort of become a little bit more kind of blue to suggest that distance. Kind of up to that point there. So again, I'm just going to soften that. So now when I come to this side where I've got this very sort of dark patch, I can really afford to sort of be very bold with the way that I'm kind of putting that one down, and I'm bringing a lot more sort of blues into that. And again, I'm using my negative painting around, that bridge, so I'm doing almost like the brickwork. I know I can see that there's a gate there, so again I can use my negative painting for that. So I'm leaving the gaps. I'll go back to my blue. Okay, so just simply by sort of leaving some gaps, there's a few sort of chinks, perhaps of light sort of coming through. Okay, so very easily I'm able to kind of build up that image there for, I'm going to make it very blue at that end. Okay, so really that is like the first sort of layer of trees that I'd like to put in. So just to sort of go over what I've done is that I'm not using any kind of instrument other than the brush just to kind of make my marks. And what I'm doing is I'm varying my marking and colours as I'm going along. So, you know, what I'm trying to create is a kind of bigger, broader kind of marks perhaps on this side where, you know, it may well, you know, it looks like it's kind of closer to us, and slightly sort of more blocky kind of marks here on this side. To indicate that, you know, that's kind of further away. So, you know, you almost get this kind of overhang look over on this side. So once I've kind of got that colour down, I've then just kind of used my paint, you know, just to sort of add the odd sort of drop in, you know, whilst it's still wet, just to kind of indicate, you know, some other form in there. And that, you know, by doing that, I can sort of create different kind of sort of languages within the painting. You know, so I've got some negative painting, you know, I've got some, you know, positive painting in a sense. You know, I've used negative painting here. You know, I've taken some of that positive painting and, you know, put it over the bridge itself, but I've also left a little gap to indicate that the bridge may well be sort of extending further along here, perhaps somewhere. You know, I've left gaps so that I can see that first layer of colour underneath as well. So, you know, it's not just about kind of thinking, right, I'm just going to fill that green in, but just kind of varying your mark making really kind of as you're going along. So whilst that's still wet, I can now sort of perhaps go into the bridge and think, okay, well, maybe, you know, I don't really need to do too much to the bridge. Add a little bit of a shadow under here. Okay, so really that's the second layer done, and I'm going to allow that to dry, and then we'll come back and look at it one more time before I would probably say that the painting's finished. Okay, so this is now nice and dry, and we've come to that kind of last layer of colour. So problem areas. So this is what I would kind of do next, is to kind of go through areas that I think need work. Okay, so, you know, generally speaking, I'm very happy with the painting, the way it's developing, but I know that there's certain areas that kind of need help. So the first one being this area here, where the bridge and this part here are kind of merging. Okay, so I know I need to do something here. there needs to be some kind of shadowing sort of happening here. Maybe I need to sort of darken this area here just there, so it gives it a sense of there's something happening here. And I also feel that perhaps there's maybe a little bit of work to do around here, but I think this is the most urgent thing, so that's where I'm going to start and really sort of start looking at the bridge a little bit. So tonally, I think it needs help. This is, this is what I'm thinking, but it just needs help in a few places. So let's get started with that. So I might just actually use a very, very small brush so that I can sort of do this area in here. I want to keep this side as cool as possible, so the colours that I'm going to use is mainly a very sort of dark blue, but I feel it needs a little bit of kind of darkening in here. And maybe just along in here as well. So this bit here is a little bit warmer, so Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that, and more or less it's kind of, well, in fact it is finished. So I'm going to take my masking off. Okay. So I really hope that helps with the whole doing of the trees, and just making sure that you don't go into kind of too much detail. I'm just going to lift that up and show you a little bit more in detail. Okay, so have another go this week, and see how you get on. I look forward to seeing your work.